How do products from your local farmer end up on your plate? What happens to food waste? Can we offer quality food in the fight against food poverty? Integrated urban food policies can answer these questions. And the Food Trails project is helping cities develop their own to positively impact food systems. From farm to fork. The project operates under the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact and responds to the EU Food 2030 policy. Each partner city is running a living lab to find tangible solutions to specific food issues. From developing food councils to coordinating food aid, from strategic public procurement to food education. In Food Trails, collaboration is a key ingredient. At the local level, relevant stakeholders are involved in designing solutions. And at project level, researchers and European cities come together to exchange and learn from each other. Create your own recipe for more sustainable, healthy and inclusive urban food policies. Join the Food Trials momentum.
Hi everyone, thank you for being here. Welcome for this 8th and last episode of the Food Trails webinar series, Midday Munchies on urban food policies. Before we start diving into today's topic, I'll give a few words about the Food Trails project. As some of you might know, it's a 4-year EU-funded Horizon 2020 project, which aims to translate the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact's collective commitment to integrating urban food policies into measurable and long-term progress towards sustainable food systems. The projects work with 11 European cities in supporting them to implement sustainable, healthy, and inclusive food policies. Nice to meet you. Thank you for being here. I am Lucie Jeandrain, Urban Food Project Officer at Eurocities, and I will be moderating today's webinar. Maybe a few words about Eurocities. It's Food Trail partners and also the leading network of over 200 major European cities working together to ensure good quality of life for all our citizens. And one of our 7 goals is to support urban food systems, which we are doing through the Food Trail project, amongst other activities. Next slide, please. So we are here today with Shaleen Meelu, our cross-cutting manager focused on nutrition in cities, Hiltje van der Wol, policy officer for the city of Groningen, and Elisa Porreca, project officer for the city of Milan. Next slide, please. So before I start diving into today's topic, what is this webinar series about? So after almost 4 full years of the project, this webinar series aimed at sharing beyond the project consortiums the knowledge and experiences built by the Food Trail cities and experts. Each webinar aims to promote the application of solutions and best practices and hopefully inspire some of you to do the same in your own city. The series has touched actually on many topics such as local food, food waste, or public procurement. And yeah, as I mentioned, today is already our last episode of the series that we started in March. So for those who were already there then, thank you for sticking until the end. Next slide, please. So I promise we kept you a great and very relevant topic for this last webinar. So today we are going to dive into the role of cities in granting access to healthy and quality food for all. We believe that healthy, quality food should obviously not be a luxury product. It should be easily accessible to everyone, no matter where you live in the city. But unfortunately, in practice, this is not always the case. Many communities face significant barriers to accessing nutritious and affordable food in city and in their own neighborhoods. So how can a city, as a public body, ensure that all citizens have easy access to good food, regardless of where they live in the city? That's a crucial question we'll be addressing today. We'll be exploring various strategies and initiatives that can help bridge the gap between food availability, accessibility, and also the idea of, okay, what is quality food, what is healthy food, and why we should all have access to it. So for today's webinar, Shaleen will talk about the relevance and ways for cities to foster the access to healthy and quality food for all. We will then leave the floor to Hiltje and Elisa, who will present how they successfully worked in pushing for access to good food for all in the city of Groningen and the city of Milan. Before we start, before I leave the floor to Shaleen, I'll give you some extra logistic info. So we'll first have the presentation of all the speakers. After that, 20 minutes will be given for Q&A at the end of the session. So to all the participants, if you have any questions, please write them in the Q&A function of Zoom. And we will make sure to answer them after the presentations. If you write question in the chat, we will not be reading it. So please only use the Q&A function. And one extra wish from me is we would like to collect feedback for this webinar to see how interesting and relevant it was for you. So I'll share the link in the chat of this very short form that you can fill in at the end of the webinar. So yeah, thank you very much for being here. And Shaleen, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, should I say, to those of you that aren't in the UK. We're going to be joining you in afternoon time soon. I'm really pleased to be joining my colleagues to deliver this presentation. And I've been working in public health nutrition now for just over 2 decades. And I've shortened the title that I was given, How to Ensure Access to Healthy and Quality Food for All, with this one word, good food for all. And what I wanted to start off by saying is that when I first started out, good food really was about nutrition and health, our health and well-being as individuals. Obviously, since then, the big focus is on planetary health as well as our health. And so whatever we do, we need a thorough understanding of what that means. And so the Food Trails partners have focused on the planetary health guide that was developed by EAT. But we are also really aware of our own national guidance. And I don't want to delve too much into nutrition today, because I think I want to answer that question about what is it that cities can do. And then we can then think about who we need to work with in order to be really impactful. I'm also not going to delve too much into statistics, because I'm assuming that everyone on this call knows that we have a massive problem, not just for the planet or for us as humans, but in Europe, we can see that there's rising poverty and people genuinely cannot access diets that are going to support their health and well-being, or the health and well-being of their children. So the priority for cities is, regardless of national policy, and we are in a very difficult time where people are electing, is what is it that we can actually do, and what can we do right now? And my message, this is the really important message that I want to say from the start, is one action is not good enough. We need to do multiple things all at the same time, and there's an absolute urgency about it. So I just wanted to make sure I got those out so that you can understand, because I'm also always aware that there are some people joining webinars who have no experience. There are some people that have lots of experience. So it's just to make sure that we have healthy debate and discussion after this. I would love that. So next slide, please, Marius. Okay, so what, for me as a public health nutritionist, what does healthy quality food imply? And the big phrase for me, and I was sharing this with colleagues and I've been saying it for a while, is dietary diversity. So yes, we know that sugar, fat, salt are bad for us, and that we know that we need to eat more fiber, we need to eat more veg, and we need to eat more fruit. But the thing that gets missed out from that message, and we obviously need to eat more plant-based protein, is that we really want dietary diversity. For us as human beings, we need to be able to increase our chance of accessing all the macro and micronutrients that we need. So nutrient adequacy is a key component of it. Chronic disease prevention, I mean, that's the reason that I got involved in this work, is that the communities that I belong to have really high risk of diabetes and heart disease. And I thought it was an absolute tragedy that there are lifestyle related factors that could modify that. And that's still the case, and it's getting worse. And it's getting worse at a younger age now. So we really need to think about that. And when we think about what good food is, we also need to think about what it is across the life cycle. So how we work with older people is totally different to how we work with those at early age or pregnant mothers. And then we also need to think about how teenagers might respond to our interventions. This improved gut health is now, I think I'm learning more about gut health from Netflix than from scientific papers, though there are lots of scientific papers. I shouldn't really say that. It sounds like I'm not reading. But gut health is also great for mental well-being, which is super important. In the UK, I've just returned after 2 months in a totally different country, a low and middle income country. And it is striking to me how low, like depressed people are. And so actually we want to be eating and making lifestyle choices that improve our mental well-being as well. And gut health has been linked to mental well-being. And that also really relates to the next point, enjoyment. I would say for me personally, good food is really key to my enjoyment, my daily enjoyment. And it also reduces monotony. I mean, okay, not very many people are going to say that, but it's so exciting for me after 3 hours of work to be able to go to the kitchen and rustle up something nice. And I think kids feel the same. They want to have something fun. They want to eat something nutritious. And they also want something they can relate to, which relates to the next point, which is to do with cultural heritage. So I know that from my cultural heritage, I can eat lots of pulses. I'm really used to it, but not everyone can. And so we need to think about what's culturally appropriate and what are our almost digestive systems going to be happy with when we start developing programs. Community connections are really important. And I really fear that in Europe, Northern Europe especially, we need to learn more from our Southern European partners about what eating and community means, which is this picture represents. I'll give an anecdote later if I have time, but I'm actually running out already. And then obviously the final point is environmental sustainability. So what is it? Oh, thanks for the next slide, Marius. What is it that governments can do? And what I think is really important now is the point that I made at the beginning. We need more talent within local government. So employ a food team. Our city council, Birmingham, employed a food team. There are very few. Milan has a department dedicated to food policy, which is, I would say, the gold standard for the world. We need to use data to understand access, who is accessing diverse diets and who isn't in the community. And we do have tools to enable us to do that. I think Europe and the EU need to start thinking about feast. They're not using the food insecurity experience scale, which other parts of the world are doing. And it would be good to be able to use methods that we can compare. Understand barriers to access. We've been doing a lot of work around citizen engagement and innovative ways of engaging communities that are not typically engaged. And I don't think that we're there yet, but we really need to step up and start thinking about how better to do that. And I've written explore policy and strategy levers, because as well as the policy levers that are available to us, there are the strategies that are developed by committed decision makers, politicians and leaders, people who are really committed, that can really change what's happening within a city. And using a systems mindset is really important. I grew up and worked with people that would be so convinced that the answer is cooking in schools, for example. We need to get everyone to cook in schools. One solution is not going to work. And that's something that the systems mindset will help us to understand. And we need to change our mindset. We need to do it quickly. And the big point for me, and I'm going to make a quick in relation to the next slide, is invest in advocate for investment. We have to do that non-stop, because if we move on to the next slide, please, Marius. The people that are going to support change to happen are our communities, but our communities cannot pick up the pieces and do this for free. So even last week we were in Copenhagen, and Professor Tim Lang mentioned that really important right now is building community resilience. And that's great. But right now, these communities are so struggling. They need resources, and we need to think about, as city authorities, how we can better use our resources to get the people that actually know what to do with their communities and to be able to implement that. So, I mean, you can see the list there about what communities can do, and there's a lot, but I don't have much time to go through it, but feel free to ask questions next. But just one point. Nutrition education is important, but what we want to do is empower people to have practical skills, down to the understanding how to shop effectively on a budget, how to cook when there's no time, how do you cook a meal when you have no resource in your kitchen, how do you have a balanced diet, that kind of thing. So, and I'm pleased to say that the case studies that you're going to hear about are going to talk about that. We'll move on to the next slide, please. So I've for another project, another presentation in Berlin, I gave examples of some of the most amazing pilots and interventions that are taking place all over the world. And what I said is what I want to see is that not for us to replicate 1 or 2 or 3, but for one city now to understand that in order for them to have an amazing impact on their citizens and to enable them to make healthy, sustainable food choices, they need to do everything. And they have to start off when they're planning with that mindset. It's not good enough to do 1 or 2 things. So that's my big message. And yeah, I don't think I've got time, but if I've got time later, I'll give you an example from the States. The States obviously have some amazing examples. I was in San Francisco last year and saw some unbelievably incredible projects. But we can talk about that towards the end if there's time. Yeah, so just about the dietary, this is really important. I don't want to miss out. Like when I talk about dietary diversity, so this amazing platform has been launched. My key message to those of you that are working in this is, even if you don't have a background in nutrition, is look at this website, the Global Diet Quality Project, and you'll be surprised when you compare countries to see which citizens of the world are accessing the most fresh produce, which are consuming massive amounts of carbonated drinks. And that is the level of data that we want for our communities. Should I be telling my community to eat more pulses? Yes. But should I also be working on reducing consumption of carbonated drinks? And we'll get into that mindset if we understand how our populations are consuming. So I'm hoping this is being collected at the national level, that we'll be able to collect data at the subnational level. And that's it. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from Elisa. If you want to contact me, feel free. There's my email. And yeah, there we go.
Thank you so much, Shaleen, for this presentation, and indeed for showing how intricate good food is to so many other topics than just what you find in your plates. And thank you for also teasing us for all the different, I would say, details and facts that you can share with us during the Q&A session. I will now leave the floor to Hiltje, if I'm not wrong, or to Elisa. I don't remember anymore. We can go to the next slide. Yes, I will now leave the floor to Hiltje to give us some example, some concrete example of how Groningen is tackling this challenge of giving access to good food for everyone. Hiltje, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lucie. Good afternoon to everybody. I'm Hiltje van der Wal. I'm a policy advisor for the municipality of Groningen. And well, I want to tell you something about the things we did, but also about what we are planning to do, and which we are hoping will make a big change in the whole food system, in the local food system. So next slide, please. Well, Groningen is a city in the northern part of the Netherlands. It's about 240,000 inhabitants. It's a university city, so a very young city. 1/6 of the people is a student. Regional function, biggest city in the northern part of the Netherlands, and it's a densely built city in an agricultural environment. Next slide, please. One of the things which is very obvious, which is not obvious if you visit the city, but there's a big amount of people who live on a low-level income, which are amongst more than 4,500 children, which is very worrying, of course. Next slide, please. And our food system, due to the changes in society, people who have no time to cook a proper meal, to buy, prepare, etc., like my mother used to do when I was young. This changed our food system very much, and also it's not sustainable anymore. It's unhealthy. There's a lack of knowledge and skills, and the food industry, at least in the Netherlands, is huge. So next slide, please. That's why we have to think about how to change this system, because it's our health, of course, but it's our climate as well. So it's very important to do that. And that's why municipality of Groningen has a food policy for quite a long time. But we just issued our new policy last week, and we try to change the whole system by focusing on the produce, consumption, and the food environment. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we start with the more local produce so that people get to know their food, where the food comes from, team up the food producers with the restaurants, with the citizens, etc. So we get a more local food system of which we have more grip on what's happening and to get it more sustainable, etc. Next slide, please. And one of the main things we try to aim is at children, because what you learn as a youngster stays with you for a long time, and it will become more easy to have a healthy and sustainable food attitude and eating and preparing your food yourself more, because of 80% of the produce in our supermarkets, at least in the Netherlands, is unhealthy. It's processed or ultra-processed food, which tends to be not very healthy for you. Next slide, please. Within the Food Trails project, we worked with an area which is called West Park. It's a small park where there are 4 food initiatives. There are a lot of food initiatives in the city of Groningen, and we are teaming up with them because we work from what's already there, because as a municipality we haven't got the knowledge nor the time nor the skills to drive the community by the municipality. We need our citizens to do that together. So within the West Park there are the school gardens. Every child within Groningen gets a food education in the school gardens to grow, cook, learn about food, etc. So we're working on the skills and knowledge there. There's a community-supported agricultural initiative, the Blije Bodem. And there's a food forest, which is an educational food forest. It's growing, so it's more educational than you can harvest from it. And there's a social initiative, Tuin in de Stad, where people can come whenever they want, whatever they want to do. You can cook there, you can grow your food, you can eat together, you can, well, just lay in the meadows and enjoy the weather, whatever. These 4 initiatives started working more together during the Food Trails project, and they are now a proper cooperative, an official cooperative. And a couple of months ago, they came up to us and they said, well, we want to ask if you could help us to build a platform, because we think there's so many initiatives in the city of Groningen. We should team up and we should be more visible and accessible for everybody in the city, because it's not only the poor people who eat unhealthy, it's also the people who are very busy. They get a ready-made meal delivered or get a ready-made meal, which tend to be not very healthy as well. So it's for everybody. So next slide, please. So we started to think about it with them, with one of our universities. And well, they said to us, we want it to be sustainable, we want to be local, it should be healthy, and it should be animal friendly. And we want to call it our food of the people. So we are now doing research in which organizations want to team up within this food platform, because we think we thought within our new policy that there should be a food hub of some sort. It can be just a kitchen or a kitchen garden or whatever, and that everybody has something, some sort of food thing in their vicinity, so the accessibility will grow. And if all these initiatives team up and work together and learn from each other, and we have a good network also connected to the local growers around the city, then we could change something in this in our food system. We just started. but well, it's an initiative from which I think could be the start of the transition in our food system, in our city food system. It looks a great initiative that could reach more people in their life and improve the food they produce by prepare and eat. And probably this could be one of the drivers that could change the food system in the city. Next slide, please. Well, this is an image of how in our new food policy we are looking at the food system and how to change it. And one of the things is that called the Netherlands, which is, I think, not very usable, or most of the European countries provide hot school meals, but in the Netherlands it's not done. But one of the things we aim at is to work together with this food hub or this platform in the future to try and have all schools supplied with hot school meals and education, etc. Well, thank you very much, and well, questions will come later. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hiltje, for giving us this very concrete and super interesting example of Groningen and how you're really tackling to do a bit of everything, a bit everywhere. I'm now going to leave the floor to Elisa to give us a concrete example on how Milan is trying to provide good food for everyone. Elisa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lucie. Thank you all for being here today to follow our examples. And also really thanks to Shaleen and to Hiltje for the very inspiring speeches that we just heard. So I will try to give you a very brief glimpse of a part of the work that Milan is developing to make the food system at local level more accessible. Because indeed what we also heard from the previous presentations is that we need to a bit of everything to really make it work for people that are struggling with access to healthy and nutritious food. And maybe in the next slide, what we have been doing in Milan since 2015 was really to try and implement and bring into practice what the food policy that was this text approved in 2015 tried to set as our main goals, and one of which is indeed to guarantee access to food for all. And in the next slide, this was indeed the 5 goals that you have just seen were meant to guide the actions. And we, in the several years, we concentrated part of our effort in thinking about how to improve existing public services and exploiting a bit the existing infrastructures to really make sure that they brought on and they carried on all the 5 goals that we promoted with the food policy. And an extremely lively and useful field for this kind of aim have been our school canteen system of the city. So as a bit of context, the school meal system of Milan was founded at the beginning of the 20th century, so it's quite ancient on the opposite side compared to Groningen, but of course this is due to many different cultural heritage of each cities. So this is the case of Milan, and indeed to this date we still have the whole service managed by an in-house company that is owned by the municipality. So it was extremely relevant also to make sure that at least in the services controlled by the municipality, we were actually looking at how to implement better access to healthy food. And as it was already mentioned, it is so important to start and develop actions and develop educational tools starting from children, and it's an investment for the future of the city, of the food system, and basically of the world in the end, or at least in the next 50 years. What is interesting to mention is not only that, as you can see, the infrastructure is very well spread in the city. The number of meals is quite high because it's 77,000 meals produced per day during the school year. But what I wanted to highlight are some actions that, I mean, we could speak about for a lot of time. So if you have questions or if you have different kind of interests, I'm super available to also provide them after the webinar. But we also stressed a lot on the need to provide different dietary options to our children, since eating at school is basically mandatory in the end. So to provide the possibility to have vegetarian and vegan options was, of course, one of our priorities, and it has been implemented for years at this point, even if the basic diet foresee a couple of days of completely vegetarian menu. But of course, there are so many alternatives that we try to provide also to really improve and ensure that children actually eat the food that is served. So there are religious alternatives and also, of course, the ones related to health requirements. An initiative was indeed to in the meal, the fruit in our system is provided at the end of the lunch. So we observe that fruit is not consumed. The level of consumption of fruit is quite low. So we established a program to bring fruit at mid-morning and to develop with this moving an educational moment also with teachers, explaining the importance of eating and tasting fruit, even if the children are not that happy before maybe doing this. And this is tackling around 20,000 children every year. They all receive fruit. These ones are have this anticipated consumption. And of course, in terms of the quality and the variety of products that are offered, there are many criteria in the procurement of the system, but an aspect that we have been developing for years again is indeed the possibility to have access to organic fruit and vegetables on one side, so fresh products, but also organic products that are maybe dairy, they may be pasta, they may be bread and other kind of ingredients of the whole meal. And it is indeed important to mention that what we understood with many observations that were made on the city and on the demography of the city, that part, let's say around 9%, these are the estimates, of children have, I mean, they are in Italy and in Milan are struggling to access to more than one healthy and full meal per day, which is the one that they get at school. So that's why we put all this effort also in providing all these options. And what I want to conclude in the next slide is really to mention what we were able to implement specifically thanks to Food Trails and to the funds that we had due to the project. So in this case, we observed the system and we kind of tried to identify which were the area where we could innovate the most. And part of it was related to developing a better circular economy approach to the school canteen system. But within this, so within the general framework of also reducing food waste in the consumption phase, which is the main food waste generator in our supply chain of the canteens, we also tackle it by thinking about the space and thinking about the experience of a meal in a school canteen in Milan. And that's why we identified a pilot action that needed to have some pilot schools. So we identified 4 schools, and we were able to develop a feasibility study that I think it's in the next slide. Yes, so we received this project to renovate and also to rethink some aspects of the experience of a school meal. So indeed, the light, the noise that there is in the environment, the space, the colors that are, of course, that should bring together children and to make them have a pleasant experience, but also, of course, to integrate all these nudging aspects with some information coming from panels, coming from posters, coming from, again, the environment in which you are, where you are meant to also pay attention and reflect possibly on what's in your plate and how important it is to understand that rice does not appear as a risotto, but is coming from the land, and the land is around the city, and you need water to nurture the production, etc. So that's also the, let's say, more educational side of the intervention. And in the next slide,
just in line with the time, I will ask you to finish up so that we can also focus on the questions for the participants.
Of course. And
Thanks.
yeah, basically this is the final result, very similar also to the project, but we were super happy of how this turned out. And I think I will conclude here so we can go to questions.
Thank you so much, Elisa, for this very insightful presentation also on how Milan is focusing or is using school canteens to provide good food for everyone. So we have some questions in the chat. Maybe we'll leave some more time for the participant to ask even more questions, and I will ask myself one question first. Maybe a bit of a broader question for Shaleen, but I think Elisa and Hiltje, you might also have a very interesting answer to that. So Shaleen, you mentioned in your presentation examples from some larger cities that like such as Paris, such as San Francisco, and Mexico City. And yeah, we can very much imagine the cities being quite multicultural hubs where a lot of nationalities are represented, and so therefore a lot of different diets. So when we also talk about good food for all, one should also consider different diets of your citizens. So how would you say cities should best tackle this challenge and be inclusive on that matter as well?
Okay, so I think city authorities should have community development teams. They should have teams that understand their communities. And so in a city like mine, where you've got super diversity, we have people from all over the world, a community development team, maybe they're called something else, will have inroads into these communities. They'll know which social enterprises to work with, which communities don't have resource embedded within their communities, and so those that are lacking. I think that's the first thing. And I will say, I'm probably a little bit bold, but I've, again, been working in this area for 2 to 3 decades, and I have to say that we do attract food policy does attract very middle-class people who do not have exposure to the kind of challenges that we're trying to fix. And so the problem with that is that we don't have exposure to those environments. And sometimes we're reluctant to go into those environments. So the first thing is be brave, make friends in those communities, and like basically get outside of the office and understand what those food environments look like. I would say that people really struggle to do that. That's including in my own city. So just get out of the office and get to know who's in the city and who is facing the biggest challenges. And that's how you'll understand what the real barriers are, not the barriers that you hear about in webinars and academic papers, but real barriers. That's number one. Number two, it depends upon the country. So I think that some countries, like I would say the States and the UK, really have been working on this. How do we engage diverse communities? And that could be working class, indigenous British people. It doesn't have to be people of color or anything like that. How do we engage the people that need that engagement? There's like a social structure of social enterprises that are very effective at doing it. And the one thing that they say is that when resource goes to a city to tackle these issues, they need to cascade that resource, and they need to not expect these communities to do things for free. So those are my two big messages. Number one is to get out there, get to know your city.
Thanks, Shaleen. Elisa and Hiltje, do you have example of how Milan and Groningen are getting out there? I don't know who wants to start getting out there and engage with the communities.
Well, yeah, maybe, of course, Groningen is not a big city, but we have a special organization form in which the city has as many departments as there are city board members. So politicians know what's going on in the area. So we always try to go out there, be there, and we have area managers which have a little bit of money, not too much, but if they get a question, can you help us out with, well, for instance, the football team. There's a couple of youngsters which come to the training in the morning and they haven't had breakfast. So they ask for some fruit. Do you have some money for fruit for these guys? So then you can decide for yourself to help or not. And it's very direct, and it's building on trust and on what's really needed. And it's so true what Shaleen is saying. You have to go out. There's a famous little book written by a Dutch guy, or a Belgian guy actually, and it's called Insulting Broccoli, because well, we go out there and tell them to eat a lot of broccoli because it's so healthy. Well, that's not the way to do it. But yeah, you should meet people. And well, in my example of the West Park, they were a little bit reluctant to join in with the project. But once they saw what we were doing, well, they come up with questions. Can you help us with this or that? Because they can't do it alone, but the municipality can certainly not do it alone. You have to do it together, otherwise it won't work.
Thanks, Hiltje, for this very concrete and inspiring example. Elisa, do you want to add up to this maybe?
Yeah, I think that this is a topic that looks, I mean, the actual thing when you try to do it in your own city is looking very different in every place. So I think that what it looks like in Milan, it has been to, like, for example, related to organizing yearly community of practices related to topics that were completely open, like, to citizens and mostly to the organizations that are, let's say, like that have this radar on the different neighborhoods of the city, and especially that are working with people in need, because of course it is internally into a local authority. You can break a bit the silos and work with the social affairs department, but it's still within, as we said, within the organization, and to let these people come and bring the issues and highlighting really what are the pain points and not just what you think or hope are the pain points has been key for us. And also it's really helping in developing a bit of a trust relationship without which you, especially when you face, for example, crisis, without that you don't have any touch with the real issues of the city and of people. And it's the same applied to a school canteen system. It's the same of keeping open and constant meetings with parents and with representatives that can bring you the voice, not only of who has time to come and write an email and have access to an email and all that to bring on their own issues, but really to have representation of all the kind of community that you are working with.
I see. Thank you, Elisa. So we have some question in the chat, I see. There is the first question, maybe more targeted to you, Hiltje, about initiatives or like similar project going on in other municipalities in the Netherlands. Maybe I will invite you to just answer them in, like, directly type the question in so that we can go to the next question. There is a question from Laura Bar. Yeah, you kind of talked about it already, about concrete examples of way to foster cultural inclusion within sustainable food supply initiatives, such as food co-op. So how can a city do that? And maybe a bit more of a targeted question to Elisa: how is it feasible to propose 33 dietary options in school canteens? How do you do that exactly?
Yeah, indeed, it's not an easy task for sure, and we are aware that it's quite an exception compared to many places that have been offering school meals for decades. The key aspect is, of course, that it is a request of the family, so it's not like an open choice. Every day children can choose among 33 options. It is indeed something that has to be requested at the beginning of the year, but there is a huge work, and also it is possible due to the fact that our system is centralized. So not having 400 kitchens, but having 23 central kitchens delivering to 400 spots in the city makes it a bit easier, not easy. It's definitely not easy, but it was really important alongside with the health requirements that are there. And since the meal is mandatory and it's not possible to bring food from home, it was necessary, but it was also to give the possibility of choice, even for ethical reasons. And that goes also with the vegetarian and vegan options.
Thanks, Elisa. We have another question from Amali, who thanks us for the interesting talks, and has a question a bit more targeted for Hiltje. So can you tell a bit more about how the school gardens are organized? How does it exactly work?
Well, exactly. That's a bit much, I think. But the city, the city owns the school gardens and organizes them as well. They are run by officers from the municipality, and we have altogether 4 sort of centers of school gardens, and all the primary schools are using them, and they have a learning scheme from group 1 to group 8, which is from 4 to 12, and they start getting to know plants and if they're soft and how they smell and how they taste, and then and when they get a bit further, and they have nature and sustainability education as well on the garden as in a school class on the garden. And when they get a bit older, they have 1 year that they really grow their own produce, and they can take it home when they harvest. But well, we noticed that many of the times it was thrown away because it was dirty, because they don't know dirty vegetables. But when we started to make little recipe leaflets and give them to them, and so they could make it at the garden, but also at home with produce they took with them home, then they started to make it at home as well. So we think, but we have to do some research on that will work. Because when your child is coming home with some produce, well, you should make the recipe that they bring as well. So that's a bit, it's a whole learning scheme for 8 years for the children in primary schools. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Hiltje. If anyone else in the participants have more questions, please write them in the chat. We still have 9 minutes together, so the moment is there for you to ask your questions. Maybe one small question from Katarina asking if the teacher are eating together with children when they have their meal for lunch in the school canteens. Elisa, I don't know if you can answer that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's say we also learned very recently that this is not the case in many other countries in Europe. For example, we understood that in France they have dedicated personnel to oversee the moment of the lunch, but in Italy, teachers are part of the lunch moment, and that's why we are also fantasizing a bit about how we could involve them a bit more, because they are the same people staying with them and educating them during all the other hours. So finding a way to integrate what also Shaleen was mentioning, people should cook at school and or at least speak about it, and not only like on the voluntary basis of a very enlightened teacher. I mean, which is great, by the way, but we have to find a more collective way to bring this into those spaces.
Thanks, Elisa. A question in the chat from Shaleen, from Amalie again, and for Shaleen. Can you tell a bit more about the projects you experienced in the US? You mentioned one in San Francisco. What about it? Please tell us everything.
I just actually posted that. So we were commissioned by a charity in my city called LGK, which it's super interesting, because this is something we realized as well, is our city is full of diverse communities, and each of those communities are working hard to tackle the issues within their communities. And so this is the Cypriot Greek Orthodox community that are setting up food banks, and they've got this beautiful center, and they decided that they wanted to open a social supermarket. So to give people that are struggling to access food a dignified experience rather than going to food banks. And, you know, it was, so he asked me to research social supermarkets globally. And because we knew about New York and San Francisco having some incredible projects, we actually did go over there. And the one in San Francisco, which I've just posted, there's a housing association, and it mainly serves, if anyone knows San Francisco, it's one of the richest cities in the world with some shocking problems. I was so shocked by what I saw with the opioid crisis and the social issues and housing issues, that it was yeah, real, like we really need to think hard. We need to get onto more complex conversations, was my understanding of that. Anyway, so this housing association, which serves the African American community, unbelievable, beautiful, started sourcing local produce from farmers, also from BIPOC backgrounds, so Indigenous, Black, people of color backgrounds, who are all struggling. And they were giving the community free food. They also had money to be able to do that. And what was beautiful was that this was the kind of fresh produce that you would see in the best organic shops in the world, being offered to the people that were struggling. And sometimes there are these cultural assumptions that people don't want to have. They don't want to eat healthily. They want to order rubbish from fast food takeaways. And to be able to see that wasn't the case was incredible. So I have posted that. But the thing about the States that they have access to, and I've been thinking about this recently, that we don't in Europe have access to, is philanthropists. So a lot of these people work their socks off trying to secure funding to make these projects happen. And there was another amazing one from the other side, so New York, that I heard about recently, Brooklyn, again, a community facing incredible pressure. And I just wanted to mention this quickly, because what they said, she was trying to write about how communities can work with this systems approach in mind, is that both the state and the local government, so New York City and the state government, have implemented policies that they can then basically benefit from. So things like local urban farming, in order to set up more sustainable food programs themselves. So what they were doing is procuring local food and supplying it to kindergartens and having an early years program, which was amazing. I can post those links as well. I'll post that link in a bit. But the point was that, yeah, this was the community coming up with the best solutions, but only because they had access to funding too, and also because they had an environment which enabled them to make some incredible decisions.
Thanks, Shaleen, for this very inspiring example. Can I ask maybe, do you know where this money was coming from? Was it funded by the city directly, or was it multiple sources of?
No, they also went to a philanthropist, and I don't want to shoot myself in the foot by saying, be careful who your philanthropists are. Theirs was possibly the Kellogg's Foundation, but we really need to think about, if we expect communities to do much more, if we think they're the ones that are going to be solving these problems for us, we need to provide an enabling environment, cascade some of our resources and make things happen. But we also need to think about where they're getting their money from. And for those of us that have been working in food systems for a long time, what we don't want to see is these programs being funded by Coca-Cola and others, but that's maybe another webinar. Let's talk about that another time.
Thanks, Shaleen. I mean, interesting question indeed, and let's make another webinar about it. We did make a webinar about financing cities' food ambition that I would also encourage everyone to watch, and that also tackles a bit these questions. I think we are reaching the end of this webinar already. So yeah, before closing off, I'll maybe give some extra information to the participants. So yeah, as you know, this was the 8th webinar of a whole webinar series organized by Food Trails. The recording of this webinar will be uploaded in our YouTube channel, and you can also see and watch already the different recordings of previous webinars. So I'm gonna put it here in the chat, and yeah, today's webinar will be uploaded in the coming days. So yeah, feel free to subscribe and put the notification on. And now I feel like a YouTuber by saying this. That's great. More things that Food Trails is doing. So it is the end of the project, and we have this amazing team of researchers that have been working with the cities on developing a handbook for implementing urban food policy. So the handbook is going to be really targeted for city officers on, okay, how can I integrate this part into my food policy? How can I put this aspect as well? So yeah, feel free to also follow us on our social media and on the website to also stay in touch when the handbook will be published. Another maybe interesting opportunities for some of the cities that are eventually also here with us today. There is the project Clever Food, who is launching a peer learning program. We launch a call to look for demonstrators that will be sharing their experience and expertise in developing food policy labs and food policy council. It will host also visits with fellows. The current call for demonstrators is closed, but there is still some spot left. So if you feel like your city is the best in organizing food policy labs, feel free to still apply, and then we can see if you can fill up the last spots. And then if you don't feel like you would fit as a demonstrators, but would be interested in becoming a fellow, please also follow the Food 2030 network to also stay in touch when the call for fellow is going to also be published. Yeah, so I'm almost done with sharing you all these links. I have one more that I shared already before, but I would love to have your feedback on this webinar, on how you experience this, what was the topic. That would also really help us for organizing potential next webinars sessions. Yeah, that's it for me. Thank you so much for all the participants for joining. Of course, thank you, Shaleen, Elisa, Hiltje for providing us with all these super interesting insights on how to provide good food for everyone. And also super thank you for Marius, the man in the shadow, who has been putting all the slides and organizing all the logistics of this webinars. So yeah, thanks everyone. I'm wishing you a nice rest of your day. Bye.